As always, we are joined by our analyst, Robert Rosenthal from IlliniBoard.com. And Illini fans maybe getting a little sigh of relief, but also Illinois not able to get a chance for a win.
Yes. I mean, 28-point underdogs, Ohio State headed toward the playoff. It's probably not a game you're going to win, but given how well they played at Nebraska, it's kind of tough to not come home and at least get a chance. Illinois has been known to get crazy and stay close in games like this, but I think most people knew the outcome, but it's still hard to not have the game played.
And Robert, as you point out, now the chances of Illinois going to the Big Ten title game, they're low, but they're not
still alive.
Zero.
Yes.
So you kind of made a little bit of a checklist here of all the things that need to happen. Let's break this down a little bit.
Okay.
We got 2 of them already.
Yes. Let's start with this. Of those teams that are listed there, 5 of the 7 are still eligible to win the Big Ten West. The only teams that can't win the Big Ten West are Nebraska, because they already lost 4 games, and Wisconsin, because they've only played 3 games and they won't have the minimum amount of games to get there. So it leaves you 5 teams, but with Northwestern losing, all of these teams are still alive. So I just ran the math of, okay, what's the Illinois math? And it looked silly before yesterday. All Northwestern had to do was win 1 more game, and it's cinched up, but they lost to Michigan State, which they probably shouldn't have. Purdue's not going to lose at home to Rutgers. Purdue lost at home to Rutgers. So that somehow in this crazy season left 5 things that would need to happen. For really, there's only 3 things out of Illinois' control, which is Northwestern has to lose to Minnesota, which is a game that might not even be played.
Yeah.
And if it's not played, that cinches it for Northwestern because they could get there. But the key to that whole thing is that basically the Big Ten put in a rule that said we're going to go by the lost column, not the win column, because some teams are going to have more games. Mm-hmm. So if someone is 4-3 and someone else is 5-3, we're going to say those 2 teams are even, and let's see how they did head to head. And in that sense, if Illinois were to beat Iowa and were to beat Northwestern, technically, Iowa and Northwestern could both be 5-3 and Illinois 4-3, and Illinois would go to the Big Ten title game over them, having beaten them both. So you have this crazy scenario where Purdue has to lose another game, Minnesota has to lose, Northwestern has to lose to Minnesota, and again, Illinois is going to be 10-point underdogs plus in both of those games. So it's not like this is the likely scenario here, but somehow in this crazy season that started 0-3. With 2 weeks left, Illinois still technically only needs 5 things to happen: 3 external and win 2 games, and Illinois would be in the Big Ten title game.
Yeah, it's 2020. Anything.
Why not?
Happen
why not get crazy
in this year? I mean, I think that when you pointed out the Minnesota Northwestern game, if that one doesn't get played, which it might likely not,
right?
Minnesota has been dealing with a COVID situation, much like Ohio State. So
yes.
That one.
And then that would mean that Northwestern can't get to 3 losses because they wouldn't have the opportunity to lose again. They would only be at 2 losses, and that would cinch it up. They would, I think they would still have to win another game and not have Iowa win out or something like that. I don't think they would cinch it if that game's not played. But if it's not played, that eliminates teams like Illinois and Purdue and others. So,
right.
So yeah. So if it does, it's not. But hey, man, it's going to be December this week, and somehow Illinois is still technically eligible to win the Big Ten West.
Yeah, and it falls on them a little bit too, because this isn't just like, hey, let's sit back and wait for other teams to lose.
Correct.
They also need to finish the season and win their last 2 games. Do you see that being feasible at all?
I mean, it is after the performance at Nebraska. It's at least feasible. Nebraska just played Iowa down to the wire. If Illinois was able to dominate Nebraska like they were, you would think at home Illinois could hang with Iowa. And the same thing with Northwestern is if Northwestern can't beat Michigan State, who's to say Illinois couldn't go up there and get a win? So it's 2 games that you're going to learn a lot. I mean, again, all of that is only possible because Ohio State got pulled off of the schedule.
Yes.
So you have to remember that was a very fortunate thing to happen, because that was likely a loss. But again, it's still possible, and it's still, it gives the coaches maybe a little goal to say, hey, let's control our own thing. I mean, the most interesting thing about that whole thing is that, say 3 of those things were to happen: Illinois were to beat Iowa, say Northwestern and Minnesota do play and Minnesota were to win, and you go into that final week like, oh my gosh, this is possible.
Right.
Northwestern could also win the Big Ten if they had COVID cases that week. Like if they had to cancel, that would give them the Big Ten and they wouldn't have to play. So that's how crazy this season is.
Right.
Of a team could either be playing for the Big Ten title game or they could not play because of some COVID cases and then win the Big Ten title game. So it's that crazy of how things are going.
Because COVID is just kind of seen as a wash. It's not a forfeit. You know, the team
Correct.
that whatever. Like, let's take the Ohio State Illinois example.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
people online are like, "Oh, it's a forfeit. It's a forfeit." No, it's just.
It's correct. It's like it never.
No contest.
It's a no contest. It
Yeah.
didn't happen. And you know, and it's the same thing happening of that you can't really control. You know, another interesting angle on this is let's just play pretend here. Say Illinois had the cases right after Wisconsin. Say they were concerned after 2 players tested positive that Thursday. Say they were concerned about the Purdue game and they said, you know what? We're not going to play the Purdue game. We're just not going to do it. We're going to be safe. We'll come back next week in Minnesota. Well, that would take a loss off the column, and then Illinois would control their own destiny for getting to the Big Ten title game if that game wasn't played.
Yeah.
So it's like when you run all this math, it's insanity. Like how do you even do that? But that's, I mean, everybody just chalks it up to 2020. That's what we're going through.
Yeah.
That's what the season's going to be like. That's what, you know, that's what the playoff is going to be like. You know, that's just it's crazy.
How does Ohio State getting taken off the schedule affect maybe what that 9th game at the end will be?
That's a good question. Yeah, it's so hard to say that, you know, you'll read some things about that 9th game of like, okay, well, say Minnesota really does have a crazy outbreak right now and they can't play. Well, then who do you pull off the schedule on the other? You just make the 7th place team not play, you know? So it's impossible to even know which teams are going to be available to play in that game or where they would be played based on where the COVID outbreaks are and everything else. So it's just pure craziness.
Yeah, I mean, who would it even, like, who would you like to see in that spot? Like, who would maybe be a good matchup?
I'd be fascinated by either Penn State or Michigan, given the seasons that they've had. Why not end 2020, you know, say Illinois, again, they'll be double-digit underdogs in these next 2 games against Northwestern and Iowa. Say Illinois were to lose both badly and finish the season 2-5. Then they would play Michigan or Penn State possibly, and maybe win that game to finish 3-5. It's just, I don't even know how to wrap my brain around some of these things.
Yeah, I think Penn State was kind of the laughingstock of the Big Ten, and now it's Michigan.
Yes, and they beat Michigan. So yes, teams who are going to be in that 6 or 7 spot on that Saturday, the championship Saturday, whatever they're calling it, on December 19th, those teams, you know, we're thinking it's going to be, okay, well, maybe we'll get Rutgers or Maryland in that game. No, you're going to get either Penn State or Michigan. Like, I can't even comprehend any of this. Of, you know, what if the bottom 3 teams in the Big Ten East are Michigan State, Michigan, and Penn State? What is happening in the world right now? How do you process this?
Yeah, you really don't.
You don't. You just line it up and say, okay, who are we playing this week, and let's go.
Yeah, well, I guess we'll look ahead to Iowa a little bit. What interests me is that these are both 2 teams that kind of value the takeaways a little bit. How might that be interesting this week?
Yeah, it's very interesting that, like, you know, Illinois is coming off a game. They were +3 at Rutgers and +4 at Nebraska.
Yeah.
So, you know, when you're on a streak like that of, you know, they've been +7 or whatever in the last 2 games and turnovers, you expect that to maybe balance out a lot. And Iowa has the kind of defense that can do it. They have an elite defense. So this will be very interesting. We saw a breakout from the offense. We've seen Illinois in the top 2 or 3 in rushing in the Big Ten after these last 2 games. We've seen that the Rutgers win was probably a little better than we thought at the time. But then you have to get into, you know, this is next to Wisconsin. This is the best defense you're going to face, and they take the ball away. And Illinois got very fortunate at Nebraska, fumbling 4 times, but recovering all 4 fumbles without losing one of them. So they do that again on Saturday. It could get out of hand quickly.
Right, and the offense shined against Nebraska, but Nebraska kind of has its own defensive problems. So
Correct.
how does that match up with what they're going to see against the Hawkeyes?
Yeah, I think it was surprising how well this weekend that Nebraska was able to move the ball on Wisconsin, or on Iowa, I should say. It was a little startling, actually. It seemed like if Illinois' defense was able to handle Nebraska like that, you would think that Iowa, with their top 5 defense going into the game, was going to completely shut them down, but they didn't. Maybe that's a little blueprint that Illinois can follow. Somewhat similar offense to Nebraska. Use some of those same concepts and see if Nebraska identified some of Iowa's weaknesses.
What do the next 2 games on the schedule mean holistically for the program? Obviously, it's a shortened schedule, so getting a win, or if they end up losing, what does that mean for them?
Well, as I said before the season, that you could kind of assume there were 3 wins that got canceled in the non-conference. Bowling Green has proven to be really, really bad, maybe one of the 3 worst teams in college football this year. UConn had all the offseason defections and graduated a bunch of seniors. They were going to have like maybe 55. That's why they didn't play. So there would have been wins over Bowling Green, Illinois State, and UConn. And so you could count those as 3 wins. Ohio State, let's be honest, was going to be a loss. So you could still play out that original season and say, okay, they would have won these 3, and they would have beat Rutgers and Nebraska, but they would have lost to Purdue, lost to Minnesota, and lost to Wisconsin. And then they would have lost to Ohio State. So let's say they're 5-4 right now. Well, let's look at the season like that. If this was a 5-4 season, they would be needing, to get to that goal of maybe 7 wins to improve on what they saw the season before. They would need 2 more, and they would have Northwestern and Iowa to get there. So if that's the season they were trying to shoot for, of at least 7 wins, they would need to win both of these. So, holistically, yes, they can maybe take a shot at the Big Ten title game, but really, you want to see them in at least one of these to show that this midseason turnaround wasn't just 2 games.
All right, Robert. Well, thank you as always for joining us. You can hear more from him on our website, WCIA.com.